What I am going to talk about is legal history, because the University of Virginia School of Law offers a program that is somewhat unique. In fact, I think it's the only one I know of in the country, which is that you can get a master's degree in history from the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences over on main grounds there. I hope you guys have been in Charlottesville long enough to know that we talk about grounds and not campuses. Have you gotten that? Yeah. Okay, good. That's very important. You'll be kicked out of town if you don't say that right. No, I'm kidding. So on main grounds, you can get a master's degree in history and a JD in the same 3-year period. So there are lots of joint degree programs around the country, but this one is distinctive in being you can do it in 3 years. I graduated from the law school in 2005, and I did the program. And I am now one of the directors of it. I run it with some historians over on main grounds. So I want to tell you a little bit about that program. Okay, so it might not, and it won't take very long, but you may have no interest in that. That's why I was saying I'm worried about how it was described on the sheet. But at least you suggest you have some interest in legal history. So even sort of through the process of telling you about the particular program, I think you will also learn something about how to take advantage of some of the legal history resources at the law school. Okay, so I basically want to talk about the why, what, and how of the program. Why you might want to do it, what it entails, and then how you'd go about doing it if you do want to do it. Okay, the why are basically 2 reasons. 2 reasons people mainly do the program is one, if they have an interest in being going into academic law, doing what I do and what other professors here do. The reason is because it gives you an opportunity to engage in substantial work of scholarship. You write a master's thesis, and you work with actually 2 advisors, one here at the law school, one on main grounds. And you really work on developing a scholarly project. You all will have a writing requirement just to get your JD. You need a writing requirement, but that's relatively straightforward, and you don't necessarily get a lot of help writing that. You just have to write a paper. So one reason is to sort of develop a academic profile in a sense, or get your feet wet doing academic work. The second, and by far more common reason I want to underline, is simply intellectual curiosity. Well, a lot of people know they're going to go work at a firm or at a nonprofit or the government or whatever, and they've enjoyed studying history in college, or maybe they wish they had studied history in college and they didn't, or they're just interested in learning more about the law than the doctrine. I mean, you get a lot more than just the doctrine and the classes in the law school, but you want to round it out with something more, and so you're interested in doing something a little bit more. I sort of tend to think of it, I joke that it's like doing a substantial extracurricular, only the extracurricular is itself curricular, right? It's taking extra classes because you're into it. That is the more common reason. Most of the people who graduate from the program, and they're usually 3 to 5 a year, don't go on to academic jobs. Okay, so that's the kind of why. Those are the 2 main reasons. The what is basically 3 things. The program is constituted by 3 things, and really 2 things, and the third one is just a little one. The 2 things are, 1, you write a master's thesis, which I just mentioned, of 12,000 words, which is about 40 pages. So you work that, you turn that in at the end of your 3rd year. 2, you take a lot of legal history classes. And I'll explain more a little bit about exactly how it works. But basically, you're taking after your 1st year in law school, for the second 2 years of law school, about half your courses are in legal history. Okay, or history, or straight up history. And the third thing is that you simply have to present your thesis in a short presentation to your advisors and usually the other students in the program. I'm organizing actually that right now. This year, the graduating 3L class actually is the biggest year we've ever had, and I might add, ever will have. It was too many. We're graduating 8 students. So I'm in the process of organizing, of setting up their thesis presentations, or when you get a PhD, it's called a defense. We feel like that's a little too, it's sort of a war word. We like to just talk about it as a presentation. So that's basically what it is. But that's relatively small compared to the other 2, which are substantial, which is writing a major paper and taking a lot of classes. Now let me go drill a little bit deeper into the classes part of it and what exactly that means, because you might think, well, getting 2 degrees in 3 years, that sounds like a lot, and it is, but this is how it works. Okay, so when you all come to the law school, you need 86 credits for the JD, okay? That is an ABA rule that is required for everyone who goes to law school. I assume that's true in other law schools. I guess I've never checked. I assume it's a general rule. But all I can speak to is that UVA, you need 86 credits to graduate, okay, for your JD. Never mind anything else. Then, to get a master's degree requires 30 credits. Okay, that's what normally a standard 2-year master's degree involves. Okay, now we're going to do some basic math here. My tort students always hate it when we get into math, but I think this level of math is going to be okay. That equals 116 credits. I hope that's still true. That is still true, right? Okay, good. That's a lot of credits. But thankfully, you don't have to do that. And here is why. Because 6 of your JD credits count towards your master's degree. Okay? And in fact, first-year students you already do one of those, right? One of the standard first-year classes, torts, contracts, civil procedure, constitutional law, property, which are 4 credits, those count as a JD class that will count towards your MA because there is substantial historical content. That often happens to be true because of the nature of law, that almost all the classes in the law school will satisfy that requirement, that there is substantial historical content. So 6 credits right off the bat you don't have to do. The more important one ends up being that for 12 of your master's credits that you're taking on main grounds in the GSAS, Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, also can be counted towards your JD. Now, quick sidebar here. I take my role in running this program as being a sort of evangelist in general for students because any student who comes to a presentation like this, and I basically do a presentation like this in the 1L, during the year for 1Ls, is interested in doing something beyond the sort of standard curriculum. And so one thing I like to emphasize is that even if you don't do the program, you can do a lot of the stuff that the program offers. For instance, those 12 credits, you can take 12 credits of GSAS courses as a regular JD student. Anytime. Any student can do this, right? Over on main grounds. And it will count towards your 86 credits. So that's just something to know. It's also something to know if you end up going to a different school, because at Bedigen it's true of other schools as well. Right? There is a limit to it. The ABA actually limits it, right? There's a what they call non-law classroom hours is like a category, and it can't be too big. Maybe it's this, or maybe we come short of it, I'm not sure. But anyway, that means, that's 12 credits is basically, again, after your first year, 1 class every semester. So if you wanted to, right, you could take a class in biology or whatever you wanted, or philosophy during your time in law school. So that's just something to note. Okay, but 12 of those credits for the program count towards your JD. Okay, so then that leaves a much smaller number. That leaves 98 credits. Okay, and that is what you do. Okay, to do the JDMA program. Now what that means is, as you can tell, minus the 86, what that means is 12 credits are what we call master's only credits. That means you are taking, if you do the program, you do the joint degree program, what it means that as compared to your classmates who are regular JD students, you take 12 extra credits. And again, to repeat what I just said, that is essentially 1 class each semester for your second 2 years in law school. That's why I say it's very kind of tangible, curricular endeavor, right? It's just instead of, doing whatever, spending time on, softball or more charitably a journal, you're spending time taking an extra class on main grounds, on whatever you want. In history. And you can, the sort of next level of discussion of this, if people who are really interested in the program, and we can talk about this next year, is sort of figuring out, you sort of find people in the history department who would be good to match your interests. Usually you want to figure out some kind of area of interest that you then pursue, which actually leads to the last part, right? So there's that, that's the classes, right? There's the thesis that you're working on, and actually one of these classes is in your second year, you take a class that's basically designed to get you going on your thesis. There's no sort of reading content to the course. It's basically just students working on their theses, talking with each other about their ideas and stuff like that. So you actually get a kind of draft of your thesis done by the end of your second year from a class that you take. Okay, so that's the what part of this. That's essentially the content. You write a thesis and you take these extra legal history classes. The final part of what I want to say is just the how, which is if you're interested in doing this, how do you do it? Well, you don't have to do anything now, which is nice. It's really right around a year from right now. Hopefully a little bit earlier, but the deadline is May 1st of every year. And if you look at the website, what the website says is you have to apply to the law school and get in, and then apply to the master's and get in, and then it sort of makes it sound like there's a third step, but it's not really. You have already done the hardest part, which is, at least as the name of this weekend is descriptively accurate, you are all admitted students. Okay, so that means that you've already done the hardest part, which is to get into the law school. Now, then in your first year, you apply to the program, and then you do have to get into that program. And there, what is required is basically a personal statement, not unlike what you wrote for law school probably, 500 words, and 2 letters of recommendation. I think it's 2 letters, yeah. Which you can get from your same recommenders who wrote your recommendations for law school. The only thing that I'm always reminding students at the time is you have to actually go back to those recommenders and get them to click a few buttons to upload the PDF file. Again, you can't just have the SRO, the Student Records Office, send it over to main grounds. By law, they're not allowed to do that. So you have to kind of go back, but the content can be the same, right? So it's a pretty low, I don't say low bar. It's not a low bar. It's a low amount of work that you have to do the application. You have to fill out the online form. You have to get your recommenders to send the 2 recommendations in. The hardest thing to do is just to write a 500-word personal statement. And in that personal statement, you basically just want to say why you want to do the program, what you're interested in studying. And that's where, and again, this is sort of next level where we could talk about it, but you'd want to go and sort of find out people in the history department who you might want to work with and what kinds of things they're doing that you find interesting, and same for professors over here. Now, so that's basically it. I should just mention one thing which I forgot to mention at the beginning because I don't really think of it as a reason to do the program, but it is just something that we can kind of brag about, so I'll mention it, which is that precisely because JDMA students get more work, do more work on their paper than just the average sort of seminar paper, they account for a disproportionately high number of writing awards at graduation and published notes in the Virginia Law Review. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but a student note, which is sort of a term of art, it's basically it means a student work of scholarship. So the Law Review, the Virginia Law Review, and other law reviews publish notes, student notes, and that they select. And the JDMA students kind of outperform. We only account for about 1 to 2% of the class, and at least by my last measure, which was now, this is a few years old, I'm not sure, I need to update this, but a few years ago, they accounted for 25% of all writing awards at graduation. And that's not a surprise, it's because that's a big part of what they're doing. All right, so they're putting a lot more work and effort into it. But anyway, if you care about that sort of thing, that's sort of another little bell and whistle, as it were. I think that's basically, I've probably forgotten something. Oh, one slight thing that is worth keeping in mind when thinking about doing the program is that all these classes, these ones, the MA classes that count towards your JD, and these ones, but this is obvious, this is less obvious. All of these classes, which is 24 credits, do not count towards your GPA. You get credit for them as having completed them, but it's like a P, right? It's like a pass. Like it doesn't hurt your GPA. It's just not factored into it because it's unconstrained by the mean. Because it's essentially it's not a law school class. You're taking it. It's like you're over on main grounds. Even if you're in this building, it's like you're over on main grounds taking a history class. So they're not constrained by a mean over there in the history department. So that's just one thing to keep in mind.